Welcome to the Killer Author Club. 3 best-selling authors talking about killing, of the fictional kind, with the best thriller and suspense authors in the business. Killer conversations, killer cocktails, and killer guests, with your hosts, Kimberly Bell, Heather Gutenkopf, and Kara Ruda. This is the Killer Author Club.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Killer Author Club, your favorite haunt where fictional murder is encouraged, alibis are optional, and the hemlock is always in bloom. Before we officially welcome tonight's guest into the club, it's time for Killer Instinct. So, DERVLA, no overthinking, no plotting, no lawyer present, just answer, short, sweet, and deadly.
Justice or revenge?
Revenge.
One shocking reveal or a slow unraveling?
Slow unraveling every time.
Color-coded outline or sticky notes everywhere?
Color-coded outline, spreadsheets, the lot.
Be questioned by a detective or forced to read reviews?
Reviews.
Okay.
Get locked in a haunted house overnight or a morgue?
A morgue, much safer.
Solve a murder or assemble IKEA furniture?
IKEA furniture. My 16-year-old loves doing it, so that's my secret weapon.
Oh, that's awesome. Write the ending first or discover it along the way?
Discover it along the way. I wish I knew it in advance.
Have dinner with your detective or with your villain?
Oh, detective. Villain is unsafe.
So, DERVLA, you survived the first test, but wait until you see what else we have in store for you. I'm Killer Heather Gutenkopf.
I'm Killer DERVLA McTIERNAN.
I'm Killer Kara Ruda.
And I'm Killer Kimberly Bell.
And everything we mentioned tonight, from giveaways to bonus podcast content to feature guests, can be found at killerauthorclub.com or on our social media feeds. And speaking of social media, you might want to pay special attention to our Facebook group tomorrow and Instagram, because we have big news coming your way. So stay tuned for that. So now let's get to the killing. Kara, would you do the honors and introduce our killer guest?
I'd love to. Tonight's guest is a cunning and devious killer. DERVLA McTIERNAN is the #1 internationally best-selling and critically acclaimed author of 7 novels, including What Happened to Nina and The Murder Rule, which were both New York Times Thrillers of the Year. DERVLA has won multiple prizes, including a Ned Kelly Award, Davitt Awards, a Barry Award, and an International Thriller Writers Award. She lives in Australia with her family. DERVLA, welcome to the club and welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you for having me.
Yay, we're so glad you're here. Okay, can you give us the elevator pitch and why readers should clear space in their beach bags for 3 reasons for revenge this summer?
I can. In the book, 3 parcels are delivered to 3 very different homes: a respected psychologist, a struggling single dad, and this beautiful socialite. But inside each parcel is tailored destruction for the person to whom they're addressed. If you open your parcel, you set and train a series of events just designed to destroy your life. And at the center of this story, there's a detective, Judith Lee. She's in her 40s. She's really competent, kind of really knows who she is. She begins to realize that all of these different things are connected, begins to pull it all together, begins to realize that maybe somebody's playing this incredibly intricate game. And at a certain point in the book, maybe begins to realize that she's always been a player in the game. She just hasn't known it.
So good. That was a great pitch. Great job. Okay, you guys, drop your questions in the comments. We'll be watching for great ones throughout the show. But first, Kimberly, what are we drinking tonight?
Tonight's drink is an espresso martini. I love an espresso martini. DERVLA, please tell us why you've chosen this as your drink tonight.
Well, I've chosen it because I am turning 50 this year, sadly. And as the evening goes on, I get more and more tired. So if I want to stay up and continue to have fun, I need the caffeine element of things. However, as I am in Australia, in Western Australia, and it's 9 a.m., I am missing out and sticking to tea this morning. Sorry to be so boring.
Well, that's okay. We're drinking water, so
Usually, yeah.
cheers to you.
Cheers,
and
everybody.
congrats.
Cheers.
Okay, so we created the Killer Author Club so readers like you could get up and close and personal with your favorite thriller writers. Our upcoming lineup is stacked with killers including Noelle Ely, Charles Donnelly, Eric LaSalle, Tess Gerritsen, and more. But tonight it's all about 3 reasons for revenge, and here's what early readers had to say. Publishers Weekly gave it a star, one of the coveted stars, and said, jaw-dropping. This will keep readers up at night, all night.
And Lisa Gardner said, McTiernan pulls no punches in this dark, explosive thriller.
And our killer Hank Philip E. Ryan says, an absolute triumph.
The clues have led us here. Now it's time to question the mastermind behind it all. It's time for tonight's killer question. So, DERVLA, we must know, when do you kill?
I kill months before my fingers hit the keyboard. I usually kill between the pages of a notebook, just like this one, where I figure it out in advance. At least I know who's going to die, even if I don't always know who's doing the killing.
I love that. I love a notebook.
Same.
You're kind of a methodical killer.
Yeah.
It's all pre-planned.
I think so. I mean, look, for me, I think it's always got to be a mix of the planning and the organic. I'd love to think that I could find a perfect method. Like every time I write a book, I think maybe I've figured it out. You know, this is how I'm going to do it from here on in. It's going to be, I'm going to do this much planning, this much organic work, this much whatever. But it changes for every book because every book just demands something slightly different. What I don't think I could ever write entirely without an outline. And you hear these writers, I don't know where you guys sit on this spectrum, but you hear these writers, no outline?
Kara does it.
Really? I do not, I mean, bow down. I do not know how you do that. That is just an impossible task to me.
Oh, that's so
Agreed.
funny. Well, and what you guys do is impossible to me. So if I had an outline, my characters would be like, run screaming. But yeah, so it's just, I mean, I think the key that we've found, like interviewing all of these amazing authors, is that everybody has their own twist on the process. And nobody's like a purely all the way one side plotter or pantser or whatever. And each book is different, to your point too. So it's kind of, it's really interesting to talk to people about craft because of that. But then again, there's no one right way.
There's no one way. And I think when you're starting out, you're so desperate for someone to tell you how to do it because you're so lost and you just want there to be a kind of a formula or at least a method. But the joyful thing about being 8 books in now is you sort of begin to understand what you can and can't do yourself and where your skills lie. And you get to draw on more tools from the toolbox and just let it kind of happen in a way, and not be stressed about the fact that you don't exactly know how you're doing it this time around because you know you're going to get there one way or another.
Yeah, I love
Trust
that
the process. So in your notebook, I've read that you described 3 reasons for revenge as exploring whether revenge is truly ever justified. So when you're starting in your notebook, did you begin with that question or did that kind of unfold as you wrote?
Honestly, I was just trying to pitch a good idea to my publishers because
we all,
you know, when you get to that point where you're like, okay, you can kill yourself to write a really good book, but if you can't figure out how to sell it, then you're stuck. You know, you've put 2 years of work into this book, and if someone opens the pages, they're going to find something good. But first, you have to get them to open the pages, right? So I was like, okay, I need a premise that I can explain quickly and that people will be interested in. So that pitch I said to you guys earlier. That's how I pitched it to my editors. I was like, okay, there are 3 boxes and there's destruction and we don't know what's in there and all of this stuff. And they were like, we like that. Run with that one. And then I went back to my desk and this notebook and went, oh shit, what am I going to put in the boxes? No clue like what was going to be. And I really sold it on the basis of, you know, all the boxes are somehow connected and the person who put them together knows all this intimate detail about people's lives and how do they know that and all this stuff. Not a notion what the solution to these questions was going to be, which was an interesting challenge. But then it made the writing kind of fun. And, you know, I really did want to know the answer to the questions and hoped that readers would feel the same way. So it was kind of an exploratory process from there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and no spoilers, but the contents were so perfect. So
Thank
perfect.
you.
By the third one, it was like, oh my gosh, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? So
I'm so glad.
Yay. Okay, so my question is, revenge stories often make readers sympathize with someone they probably shouldn't. Did you ever catch yourself rooting for the wrong person while writing the novel?
I kind of did. I mean, the villain in this story has a really sad backstory, and you see it in little snippets through the book, just tiny little, interstitial passages where you get an insight into her story, and then a little bit more through the book as it unfolds. And even one of my editors at one point was sort of saying, pushing in a way for it to be a different book where this person became someone that you could almost come back around to, But to me, I knew some of the things she was going to do in the book, and they're pretty unforgivable. And I think I was interested in the idea of someone can have a tragic history that we genuinely feel deep empathy for, but they can also become someone who creates those tragic histories for other people. And at a certain point, you cross the line, And so I feel like she crosses the line, and that's an interesting thing, I think, to explore, because this question of revenge versus justice. In this book, we have people who have been deeply, profoundly let down by the system around them, the people who should have been there to protect them, the people they should have been able to turn to. And so they seek their own personal justice. We can all have sympathy for that, right? But at a certain point, it goes too far. That was Erin who just popped up in the
That
screen.
was.
Hi, Erin.
Hello, Erin. We all love Erin.
do.
She's the best.
All right, so let's talk about Judith Lee, because she's carrying some baggage before this investigation even begins, including something from her past that she's never really forgiven herself for. So, and this case kind of intersects with one of her biggest regrets. Can you talk about her for a little bit?
Yes, Judith is, she's pretty tough. She's a cop in Melbourne, not an easy thing to be, and she's been a detective for a long time, and she's found a way to kind of figure out who she is. She has her own tragic history, you won't be surprised to hear, and she grew up in difficult circumstances. But by the time we meet her in the book, in her mind, all that's resolved. She knows who she is. She likes her life. She likes the person she's become. She's confident and good at her work. But of course, the book, because she's the protagonist, the book in a way has to be designed to truly challenge her. And in the course of the book, because she sees, her antagonist, the person who's working behind the scenes, and begins to see some similarities between them, it forces her to question if she's right to be as satisfied with who she is, or if there's still work to be done, or, there are bigger questions for her to answer over the course of the book. But she's a fun person to spend time with because she's quite uncompromising. I think maybe there's an element of wish fulfillment for me, because she's very blunt where I might be more diplomatic, and she's very direct where I might be a bit more careful. And it can be, I mean, I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you guys would feel the same way. It can be fun to write that kind of character who's a bit more extreme than you might be in real life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was going to ask if you rode a motorbike, like.
No, I wish. No, I'm not that cool. Come on.
I love that about her.
Katie just asked, did you see yourself in any of the characters?
I'm not sure that I do in this book, Katie. I mean, there are things I really like about some of the characters. There's a relationship between Judith and her best friend, Katie, as it happens. And I love that friendship, and maybe that bit, that intimacy in female friendships is something I can really relate to because it's super important in my life. So that element of it is there. But the characters in this book are all a little bit more, they're just a little bit more extreme. Judith is a pretty hardcore. The person she's up against is pretty hardcore. And the three families that these boxes go through, they're all very specific people. So I'm not sure I quite fit within any of them.
And speaking of the boxes again, readers quickly realize that these aren't random packages, all prettily put together and delivered, but they kind of read almost like three different vignettes. And so how did you tackle that as a writer? You talked a little bit about outlining. Did you tackle one section all at once and then go to the next with the next package? How did that all work for you?
That's such a good question. I slightly distracted by Melissa saying what's in the box. 'Cause
Yeah,
that
what's in the box?
We have so many questions
from the
coming
movie.
through.
Do you remember Seven? Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that's where that idea had come from. And Melissa, that is where it came from, I think, because watching anybody who watched that movie, like if you're Gen X and you watch Seven,
Yeah.
the scene at the end where the box arrives and it's what's in the box and Brad Pitt screaming, it just turned that like innocuous cardboard box into a source of
Yes.
horror. I think some part of me kept that in my head and it came back out in this book in this form. But the vignette thing was a challenge because, like, what was interesting to me as a writer was these three distinct households. You know, we've got Robert, who's married to Vanessa. He's a psychologist. She's a television producer. Their marriage is at that strange stage where things have been going downhill for a long time, and she hasn't really recognized it. And then the box explodes in the center of their lives. Same with the single dad. Same with the other woman. And so for me, that's where really the story lay. But that's not a novel. You know, you can't put these three stories side by side and hand them to a reader and go, here you go. I think a reader wants to follow someone through a book and experience it through their eyes. And that person should change over the course of the novel. The novel has to be about them. So I had to bring Judith through and make her the center of it. And that took time because in the beginning, she was something of a caricature, you know, and that you just can't have obviously in a novel, but she felt a little bit like she was bolshy for the sake of being bolshy. And she was, you know, that just didn't feel right to me. So actually she was the hardest part. Getting her right and getting her to fit through the book took multiple drafts until she started to feel alive to me. And I was like, oh no, I see you now. I know who you are. And it started to come together, you know.
That's so fun when that starts to come together.
It's a great
How many
feeling.
drafts do you do? Like how many?
God, so many. I would say, I mean, the book I'm writing at the moment, I would say I did 3 before it went to the editors, and then I'll do 2 structural. And obviously, like once we're through structural and once we're through all that stuff, I'm still redrafting and redrafting. I mean, when we're on copy editing, I'm still rewriting because I have to until they drag it out of my hands.
Do
and
your
they get frustrated.
copywriters be like, no, you're not supposed to change big
I
chunks?
kind of get away with it. I don't know how I've gotten away with it so far. The second book, they sent me a printed arc and I rewrote whole sections and sent it back. I don't know how I just don't tell anybody. Maybe they haven't noticed. I don't know.
Yeah, they're being really nice to you. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
I am very lucky. I just have to, it just takes me that long to really begin like to see it. I don't know. You guys are obviously more disciplined than I am. It takes me multiple times before I can really see what needs to be reworked.
Well, and distance too from the story, right? Putting it down and then coming back to it with fresh eyes. Sometimes it reads very differently, or you see things that you didn't see before.
Absolutely. With Nina, with what happened to Nina, I think that was about 22 drafts because I rewrote the book entirely so many times because I was coming at it from the wrong way and I was trying to avoid certain things happening because they were too dark for me, but they needed to happen. And that was the hardest one. That was a tough one.
I love that book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I want to go back and read it.
No, don't, because you read it and go 20 drafts.
22 drafts. Oh my gosh, how did you do this? Okay, one of the things your readers consistently praise is that your thrillers ask difficult ethical questions instead of offering easy answers. What moral question sits at the heart of 3 Reasons for Revenge?
I think it is that question of justice versus revenge. You know, when should we stand up and when should we turn the other cheek? Because I think our culture encourages turning the other cheek, and sometimes I wonder if it's encouraged it almost too much. You know, like have we lost the art of holding the line and being leaders in our own small communities? Like, because that's a hard thing to do sometimes, to go against the grain when you see things aren't right. And I've certainly seen that in my life, you know, at certain times in Ireland and other times where there were 1 or 2 people, you know, when society moved or something was happening with the economy or whatever, 1 or 2 people held the line, that made all the difference. But it doesn't always happen. And we put on a pedestal this idea of being forgiving and turning the other cheek. But there's an argument to be made that can go too far, and we sometimes should stand up and fight. So then we take somebody like the character in this situation who has been profoundly failed by the whole system around her, by the police, by various other people. And so she's the one who says, well, that's it. I'm going to seek justice. but she keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And it's at a point where it's like, well, where is the line then? And that's the question I think that's interesting to think about and talk about is what would you do and how far would you go and where would you call it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fascinating. So let's talk about Melbourne, because Melbourne is kind of a character in this book. And I read somewhere that you said this is a love letter to Australia. So what made Melbourne the perfect backdrop for this particular story?
Oh, this is the stupidest reason in the entire world. I live in Perth in Western Australia, which is incredibly hot and incredibly dry and has a big, big blue sky and sunshine and everything else. And I'm from Galway, the west of Ireland, where we have cloud and low-hanging cloud and darkness and green and wet. And I'm not sure I can write a crime novel set in sunny Perth. Melbourne has terrible weather for part of the year. So I could have my cloud and my shadows and my narrow alleyways and that all the texture and atmosphere of a city with that kind of vibe to it. And also it gave me an excuse to visit Melbourne, like we were talking about earlier, those tax deductible research trips. I love Melbourne. It's a great city, really cool place to spend time. So, and my husband loves it too. So I just said, there are plenty of reasons to go for this.
I love that. How did you end up in Australia? That's very far.
Yeah, it is very far. Well, we left Ireland in 2011. So after the subprime crisis in the States, that hit Ireland really hard, and economically things were really tough. And I had been a lawyer. I'd had a small legal practice. My husband was an engineer, and both of our industries were absolutely decimated after the crash. So we worked our way through it, but we were so burned out, and we were just like, we want a fresh start. We want to go. So because he's an engineer, it was either Canada or Australia where we could get visas, and the visa for Australia was for years, whereas Canada was just 12 months. So we said we had a 2-year-old and a baby on the way. Australia made more sense. We thought we were coming for 5 years, and we've been here. Our son turns 15 this year, so we can always measure by his age. So we'll be here 15 years this year, which is crazy.
Wow.
So did you know anybody in Australia when you made the move?
No. My first cousin was here. She was training to be a doctor, and she was just finishing off her training, and she very kindly picked us up from the airport, but she left after 4 weeks. So we were by ourselves and a baby due any minute. So the big thing was to try to find someone who could be with our 2-year-old while I was having a baby, because I wanted my husband in the hospital with us. So that was our initial challenge, finding a house, all of that stuff. It has been the most insane ride. But we came to Australia with a list of, if we're really lucky, like maybe this could happen, and maybe we could make this, and maybe that, because I'll be honest, guys, we were stony broke when we got in that plane. We had just enough money for 3 months, I think, of living expenses, and to ship our furniture over. That was it. And everything on that list has happened times 10 and more that you could never have dreamed of. So Australia has been incredibly kind to us. We've been very lucky.
What an inspirational story. That's amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Guys, really great.
So brave.
Just have to do it.
Yep,
sometimes you just have to do it. Yeah.
You do. I know. I moved us all to California, but that was a little bit easier.
Still a big move. Where were you moving from?
Just Ohio, so not like from another continent, but it was a big, it's a big change, right? And we didn't.
Did you have family in California?
No, not anymore. And so it was just kind of like flopping down.
Just you guys.
Yeah. So, but it all worked out. It's kind of like the same thing. Like, I think if you decide to stick the landing and work on making your dreams come true, they can sometimes happen.
Yeah. I think timing and luck and all that sort of stuff, you can't control for that. Like when I wrote my first novel, and Jane Harper, you guys are probably familiar with Jane.
Yeah, I interviewed her in Atlanta when she came through Atlanta.
There you go.
A couple months ago. She's amazing.
And it's amazing, and a beautiful writer, lovely person. And her first book, The Dry, came out, and it was just like a monolith of a book. One of those that just changes everything.
Yeah.
And because of Jane's enormous success, suddenly there was an appetite in Australia from Australian publishers for local writers writing crime fiction. Now, my book was set in Ireland. It couldn't have been more different. But she still opened that door, and if she hadn't, I don't know if I would have gotten that deal with that level of interest and therefore that much support and the snowball that happened after that. So, that's luck and timing, and you can't control it, but you can just hope.
And stick to it, right? Okay, and you guys, we could obviously talk to DERVLA all night, but it is now time for us to move into our giveaway. So get this. She is giving away 10 copies, 10 of 3 Reasons for Revenge to lucky U.S. viewers for a chance to win Answer This Question. A random, unexpected package addressed to you arrives on your doorstep. Do you open it? Yes or no? Good luck.
Yeah, I know my answer. So the killers are big fans of independent booksellers and want to send them all the support. DERVLA has chosen Boundless Books in Leaderville, Australia. DERVLA, tell us why you love this bookstore so much.
Well, lots of reasons. One of them personal and others just general. It's owned and run by a young woman called Elise, who was a manager at a Dimmicks bookstore for many years. And when that store closed, she was so brave and opened this bookstore in the center of Leaderville, which is this lovely kind of inner city suburb, very lively, great nightlife place on the high street. And it must have been it must have been an enormous risk for her when she did it, but she has made it the most extraordinary success. And she's running events for authors at every level, from giant authors who are writing enormous romantasy with 400 people in a theater to smaller, more intimate events for different authors with a different style and different audiences. The book it's huge, like it goes all the way back. It has a range of everything. When you go in there, you find a different book every time, something you weren't going in for. It's got that real discovery feel to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm slightly biased because my daughter started working there, so that's my other thing. The only downside for me is now I'm banned from the store, so I've lost access to one of my favorite bookstores, which is busy.
Mom.
I know, don't come in, Mom.
All right, well, we'll be dropping the link in the comments so Australian listeners can order 3 Reasons for Revenge along with any of the others on your wish list, and the bookshop.org link for everybody else. So watch for those.
So DERVLA, we know you spend your days plotting fictional crimes, but every great thriller writer is also an avid reader. Can you tell us what's been keeping you up late at night, flying through the chapters?
I can, but it's going to be one of these annoying ones because it's not out yet. It's a book by Chris Hammer called Full Circle that will be out in September. He's an Australian writer, and I've been reading it for blurbing, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's about a cop. It's a very intricately plotted book, almost epic in scope. And at the beginning of the book, a cop falls in love. He's undercover and he falls in love with someone he shouldn't. And as a result, both of their lives kind of fracture completely. And it's about them falling apart and coming back together, and the intricacy of that story, and to do with, it's set in this very kind of rarefied world of like white collar corruption and fraud and all of the rest of it. So it's absolutely brilliant. So I've just finished that, but you can't get it yet. So sorry about that. But the next one on my list is Karen Slaughter's new book, the second one in her new series. I loved the first one, so I'm really looking forward to getting into it.
Awesome. All right. Well, speaking of great books, we have 2 more fabulous new releases we want to celebrate tonight. First up is The Neighbors Are Watching by Aggie Bloom Thompson. In a place where appearances are everything, 2 people's search for the truth means not only shattering carefully curated perfection, but putting themselves squarely in the crosshairs of a killer in a scandalous, twisty thriller about obsession, betrayal, and the price of perfection. We also have Rules for Aging and Larceny by Julia London. Ocean's 11 meets the Golden Girls. I love that. When an all-female group of chaotic elderly thieves come out of retirement for one last heist against a young crypto bro while trying to repair their fractured friendship along the way. I just love that. Anyway, okay. We've got 1 copy of The Neighbors Are Watching and 3 copies of Rules for Aging and Larceny to give away to lucky U.S. viewers. Comment if you want in and tell us where you're from, and good luck. And because we're all about shamelessly plugging our own murdery fun, don't miss the killer's latest reads.
Kara's got We Were Never Friends, a sorority reunion that takes a very, very dark turn.
And speaking of deadly parties, Heather's serving up the perfect host, an over-the-top gender reveal party that explodes in more ways than one.
And Kimberly is taking you on a deadly European getaway in the expat affair, Two Americans, the glittery diamond trade, and danger in Amsterdam. We want to say a big killer thanks to Book Reporter for sharing the murder you love, and stay up to date on bookish news and events at bookreporter.com.
Awesome. All right, DERVLA, you survived the Killer Author Club. So tell us where our listeners and viewers can find you online.
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, just at DERVLA McTIERNAN, which is DERVLA, and McTiernan, McTiernan. Very Irish, I know, not the easiest one to spell, but that's where I am.
Amazing. Go find her.
Well, that's a wrap on tonight's episode. Thank you for hanging out with us. Tonight's show drops Friday as a podcast with bonus content that you don't want to miss. So find all the links at killerauthorclub.com and sign up for our newsletter so you're the first to hear all our killer breaking news. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Noelle W. Ely discussing Gray After Dark. And for podcasts, bonus content, merchandise, upcoming guests, and all things Killer Author Club, visit killerauthorclub.com. But in the meantime,
trust no one.
Question everything.
And keep turning the pages. Good night, killers.
Good night.
That does it for tonight's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to catch our next show live, we're every other Tuesday night on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For times, upcoming schedule, and to catch up on past episodes, visit us at killerauthorclub.com. Happy reading. Now get on out there and kill that TBR.